He never yelled. He never finger-pointed. But somehow things were different. One still moment, and the room ceased. What he then said left the nation listening. Stick with us. This tale lingers in your mind. A quiet auditorium, one pile of yellowed papers, and a whisper promised louder than any cheer. What occurs when the still voice of truth finally takes center stage? When the stage lights heat and two veteran voices are about to clash, ask yourself, how many times do stories of everyday lives reach the seat of power? And how might things alter if we actually listened? Tonight we travel past the cacophony of politics to the constant pulse of people who will not be forgotten. Take a walk with me to that evening in New Orleans, when a respectful challenge to recall placed an entire country leaning forward. Adam Schiff walked onto the stage at the New Orleans Convention Center, appearing as if the debate were already his. He did not notice John Kennedy's unflappable determination, the kind that can strip away every underlying fact until an opponent has nowhere else to tread. Within the auditorium itself, the air was close, vibrating almost. It wasn't the charged hum of a concert, it was the measured, bearable tension. Low murmurs filtered through the seats. Cameramen cleaned their lenses for one final time, and staff waited for a moment that could shift the entire political paradigm. Short break. Comment below where you're watching from, and subscribe so you never miss one of these stories. In the green room backstage, Senator Kennedy alone sat in a shaded green room. His jacket had a few wrinkles from travel. Reading glasses were perched low on his nose, but his shoulders remained straight. On his knees was a thin but dense folder, the type of well-worn papers that have substance. A TV mounted on the wall ticked down, 7 minutes to curtain time. Down the hall, Schiff arrived in a thunderous laugh, pumping hands and teasing about the blinding stage lights of Louisiana. His staff hurried behind, some puffed up with self-importance, others trying to avoid a rebuke. In Kennedy's room, the atmosphere remained tense. His campaign manager, Michael, stuck his head in. "Ready, Senator?" Kennedy glanced up. "Been ready a long while." Michael walked in and closed the door quietly. "You sure you want to open this up tonight?" Kennedy traced his finger over the edge of the file. "Other people may forget what he's done," he said softly, "but the people he damaged never do. They carry it around." Kennedy ended quietly. Michael took a deep breath and let it out slowly. "We've got a 2-hour block to get through. Don't let him drag you into a sideshow." Kennedy's smile didn't waver. "If he wants a circus, let him. I came prepared with the congressional record." Out in the crowded hall, every seat was taken. On cue, the moderator approached the podium. "Good evening, Louisiana, and welcome to tonight's nationally televised debate between Senator Adam Schiff and Senator John Kennedy." Applause broke through the room. Schiff bounded onto the stage first, waving and flashing twin thumbs up like a headlining festival act. Kennedy waited one beat, steady and unruffled, and gave a simple nod. He deposited his thin stack of files on the podium as if they were fragile glass, and never glanced down. The moderator set the ground rules. 2 hours, turns of answers, no interruptions. Schiff raised an eyebrow and gave the crowd a teasing smirk. A few laughed. Kennedy's eyes traversed the audience, inscrutable. "Senator Kennedy," the first question was asked, "what is America's greatest failure of its political system today?" Kennedy spoke low but clear. "Political failure rarely starts with the people. It starts at the top, doors closed, deals cut for the few, while everyone else is left cleaning up the mess." His words landed with an extra heartbeat of silence. Schiff jumped in, voice sharp. "Come on, the real failure is letting folks like him pretend they understand governance. I've fought for democracy, for millions. What's he done? Just talk." Some snickered, others looked at their phones. Kennedy didn't flinch. After the commotion had died down, he leaned into the mic. "You say you stand up for democracy," he said, as steady as a metronome. "But some of the very things that you say you are honoring have injured it." The moderator cleared his throat and forged ahead, but the atmosphere in the hall had already changed. From the opening minute, Adam Schiff performed his signature act, claimed the room for himself. He leaned forward, interrupted frequently, laughed the hardest at his own jokes, and brushed every subject with broad, sweeping brushstrokes. We once had the strongest democracy, then it was undermined. And you've lived through it, he boomed, jabbing a finger at the crowd like a coach revving up a team at halftime. You don't need lessons from someone who just reads desk papers. Cheers rolled through the hall, just the reaction Schiff's team had counted on. Along the stage, John Kennedy remained motionless, hands clasped together on his podium, serene as stagnant water. When his moment arrived, he adhered to cold statistics: stagnant wages, uncertain elections, rural and minority communities suffering the most. Schiff dismissed him. Watch him reading out of his stack. How adorable. You don't govern a country with pieces of paper. You govern it with courage. This time, the laughter of the audience was thinner. Some laughed. Others huddled together, whispering. The mood had shifted a small, yet revealing degree. Kennedy's retort slid in like a knife slicing through silk. Guts can carry you a long way, he said calmly, but without brains, you'll take us straight off a cliff. There followed a pause, then the room erupted into applause. The moderator intervened, redirecting the conversation to leadership, ethics, and accountability. Schiff leapt at it, denouncing witch hunts, unfounded charges, and so-called made-up scandals. He recited complaints as though checking names against an enemy's list a mile long. The FBI, social media exclusions, suits he called groundless. Then as an afterthought, he made a comment that caught Kennedy's eye. So subtle it was not until the cameras picked it up that it became apparent. I've paid a few things because it was easier. Not because I was in error. Schiff shrugged with a dismissive hand. Sometimes you just write a check and move on. Polite politicians of name do it all the time. It's nothing. That one sentence echoed in Kennedy's ears like a warning bell. His hand, poised above the podium, came down to sit lightly upon the creased folder. He did not open it, just left his fingers resting there. The moderator continued. Senator Kennedy, does compromising conduct have any relevance to the ethics of a public servant? Kennedy could have been succinct, but he wasn't. He looked at the moderator, then the audience, and finally directly into the camera. Most people don't get to wrap things up nice and neat, he replied, his voice even. If a landlord raises the rent, there is no PR team waiting in the wings. You absorb the expense. If a boss reduces your hours, no press release is issued in explanation. You simply buckle down. So when someone takes a compromise out of the shopping bag, yes, that makes a difference. No screaming, no theatrics, just honest truth, the kind that lingers. Schiff attempted to interrupt, but the moderator raised a hand. Senator Schiff, your turn in a moment. A flash of annoyance swept over Schiff's eyes, brief but not ignored. The crowd picked it up too. From there on, his shots were off target. He ridiculed systemic disparity, split reaction. He suggested the moderator was in his pocket, glares. He labeled Kennedy a rage-filled fame hound, and that was when the wave crested. A middle-aged man in the front row, blue jacket, hat in hand, stood up and left. Not storming out, just done. His empty chair remained in full view. Kennedy saw but did not move. He didn't need to pursue the spotlight. The room was already pivoting toward him. He had been nearly stationary all night, allowing Schiff to shine while he watched and waited. Now finally, it was his time. The moderator's second question touched on trust. How can leaders repair the increasing divide between citizens and government? Kennedy shifted his mic, took a calm breath, and addressed in a conversational tone that didn't have to rival Schiff's loudness. My father owned a small grocery store in Baton Rouge, he started. No grand ambitions, no highfalutin rhetoric, just square prices and a handshake you could rely upon. That's trust. People get damaged when Washington makes promises it doesn't keep, and I take that lesson to the ballot box each time I vote. Each time I share my voice. The audience was quiet. Even Schiff's corner was silent. All eyes on Kennedy. My father never actually slowed down, he continued, voice deep and even. Worked until his legs weakened. I think of him every time I come across someone struggling by as others hold on to power they didn't deserve, manipulating the system to retain it. He glared at Schiff without flinching. Some of us can't simply write a check and leave. Schiff shifted, arms folding. For the first time, he looked down. Kennedy rested in a hair. I recall a fellow named David, worked on a California project you supported. lost his job after the rules you rammed through, asked for assistance, received none. When he sued, you dragged it out till he was broke. He settled, but only on condition of silence. Well, I'm not David, and I can talk. The moderator winced. Schiff opened his mouth, then closed it. Kennedy cracked open his folder just enough to pull one worn legal document. I've read dozens of cases like David's, he said, holding the paper aloft. Real people, real pain, buried by settlements, memos, and legal fees they never could afford. Every case shows how power can be used, not to build, but to quiet the ones who suffer. His voice remained steady. He just allowed those names ring out in the hallway. Mary out of New Orleans, Kennedy stated softly, eyes moving across the room. An administrative clerk, terminated while out sick. He turned another page. Thomas out of Baton Rouge, contracted to refit a community center, underpaid, pressured into taking half. Another page. Sarah of Shreveport, reported hazardous working conditions, experienced discrimination, settled under a gag order so restrictive it almost ended her career. Then he glared at the moderator. You asked leadership during a crisis. Here's the truth. How someone acts behind closed doors when nobody's looking. That's who they bring with them to Congress. Schiff tried to force a laugh, attempting to wave the whole thing away. Oh, come on, everyone has disagreements. You think he's never signed something to shut somebody up? Welcome to politics. He turned back to the audience. You really think he hasn't? Kennedy didn't blink. He didn't even look in Schiff's direction. Instead, he scanned the room and stated, there is a distinction between shutting somebody up and destroying them. His tone was even but firm. Most people recognize that sensation, being instructed to move on, to forget, to put your head down, take it, and shut up. Something changed in the room. Not loud, not showy, but deep, like the type of silence that falls when truth walks through the door and you can't help but pretend it didn't. A woman in the fourth row, a red sweater, perhaps 40 or so, nodded slowly. She hadn't applauded all night, but she hadn't removed her gaze from Kennedy either. For the first time, Schiff seemed uncertain. He couldn't quite get the read on the room anymore. The moderator attempted to right the ship. Senator Kennedy, are you stating these cases had a direct impact on Senator Schiff's political choices? Kennedy responded unflinchingly. I'm telling you, when you become accustomed to trading in silence, it alters your perception of people. When laborers become expendable in your politics, don't expect them not to become expendable in your policies. No cheers, no gas, only silence. Intense, sustained. Yet Kennedy hadn't even opened the full file yet. He was merely getting started. The moderator shifted uncomfortably in his seat, obviously conflicted. Stay on schedule or admit that something larger was happening. Kennedy laid the paper he'd just read face down on the podium, not back into the pile, but alone, like a marker, a subtle cue. He had more to say. You don't see the whole picture of why those decisions were made, Schiff replied, voice softer now, struggling to regain footing. Hard choices sometimes need to be made. You balance the needs of the many. Something sometimes gets lost along the way. That's not because you're evil. That's governance. But the words didn't stick. Kennedy hadn't raised his voice. He didn't have to. He glanced at the moderator, then deliberately scanned the room. When a soldier has a limb blown off in combat, we don't refer to it as a shuffle, he said quietly. We refer to it as a sacrifice. We refer to it as a cost, and we do everything humanly possible to honor it. But when a veteran loses a home because a politician makes a deal, because someone promised relocation that never materialized, that's not sacrifice, that's abandonment. He lightly tapped the pile of files with 2 fingers. These aren't numbers. They're people. You say it's governance. I say it's memory loss, the kind that only affects those sitting farthest from the consequences. There was a long pause. The moderator said nothing. The audience didn't budge. Even Schiff seemed to stand a little smaller behind his podium. Then Kennedy said something nobody was expecting. I didn't come here tonight to destroy a man. I came to remind a nation. You've got to let me go, he said, addressing the camera. We are not meant to be governed by those who lose sight of the burden of one human life. We are meant to be governed by those who bear it in mind each time they cast their vote Each time they make their voice heard, each time they stand behind a podium. A solitary clap cut through the silence. Then two more. And then the room exploded, not with political applause, but with applause that is like release, like confirmation. Schiff stared at his notes. Kennedy didn't flinch. He just set down one last page on top of the pile. It was empty, but it meant everything. That was the genuine closing statement. Kennedy's voice was steady, but his hold on the papers was tight. Those families were promised new housing, new schools, safer blocks. They signed on, believing. But the project didn't go through. Funding diverted. No follow-up, no moving. Only letters stating due to unexpected circumstances. 47 families were worse for it. 12 never did get rehoused. One, Maria Gonzalez, passed away in temporary housing with black mold in the walls. The room dropped into a sort of silence that didn't require explanation. Her daughter emailed your office on Senator Schiff twice. I have the emails, no reply. He didn't pick up the emails. He didn't have to. Schiff shifted his weight. He wasn't smirking anymore. He extended his hand to his own pile of notes but remained silent. Kennedy leaned forward a little bit. Not in hostility, but as if moving closer to the wound. This isn't about blame. It's about remembering that every policy we champion has a ripple. And when you stand up here and say no one cares about the past, what you're really saying is you don't carry its weight. He scanned the crowd. Leadership is not about vision alone. It's about memory and accountability. And yes, sometimes it's about heartbreaking stories. Because if we can't feel the cost of our choices, then we have no right to make them. A soft gasp emanated from somewhere around the middle of the aisle. Schiff did not glance up. Kennedy set the Shreveport file down beside the others quietly. His pile now resembled less paperwork and more a document of muted, overlooked agony. The moderator turned to Schiff. Senator, do you have a response? Schiff didn't budge for a moment. Then under his breath, no, not in support, but because, for the first time, he realized the room wasn't hearing him any longer. Kennedy held the paper gently, like it carried more than ink. He sent this email in early 2020. It wasn't public ever. He was warning inside about pressure to spin intelligence briefings to fit a narrative. He wrote, "We're losing sight of integrity. If we bend facts now, what will be left of truth in the end?" He paused and for an instant didn't say a word. He let silence speak. 2 weeks later, Nathan was reassigned. 6 months later, he quit. He's never spoken publicly, but he didn't need to. This speaks enough. He laid the email atop the rest. The final piece. Schiff rubbed the bridge of his nose. So we're on trial now? Over every staffer's opinion? Every policy that didn't work out? Kennedy didn't respond to the deflection. He just asked, how many have to get hurt before the person in your situation can say, that was on me? The moderator started to open his mouth and proceed, but didn't. The room had changed. The debate wasn't being managed anymore. It was happening. Kennedy released a soft breath, then spoke again, this time in a low but articulate voice. I didn't come here to bury anyone. I came to remind people that leadership isn't loud. It's not clever lines or flashy moments. It's standing in the middle of a storm and saying, this was my choice, and I own it. Then he stood back. There was silence. No music played, no sweeping fanfare, just the creak of chairs as the audience leaned forward, drinking it all in. And Schiff, once the room commander, with his voice, sat in silence, encircled not by invective, but by a truth too multifaceted to dispel with one-liners. The moderator eventually broke the silence. Let's take a brief break. Nobody budged. Schiff swept her arms wide, attempting to reclaim the room. Carefully chosen moments to make me seem callous. But public life is not about not making mistakes. It's about being present, day after day, and getting it done, even when it's ugly. I've made decisions with partial information. We all have. That's life. He spoke more loudly, but not more forcefully. He strained with what had preceded. But I stood up to authoritarians. I defended our institutions. And yes, I fought for people, millions of them. Perhaps I didn't win every fight, but I never stopped. He paused, expecting something. A clap, a nod of forgiveness. None. Kennedy didn't break. He didn't blink, just waited. And in the silence, Schiff's words seemed to deflate. The moderator finally looked at Kennedy. Senator Kennedy, your closing remarks. Kennedy adjusted the mic once more. No flash, no hurry, just a guy whose voice had already said it all. You asked a little while ago what leadership is like when trust is lost. It is like this. Not explaining your record, but hearing. Not hiding behind your resume, but standing with the people your decisions hurt. The ones without microphones, the ones without attorneys, the ones who don't receive a seat in places like this. He gestured gently to the now flat stack of documents. These stories, they're not political tools. They're the consequence of forgetting that real lives sit at the end of every decision we make. We don't get to erase that. We shouldn't want to. He took one step back from the mic, his voice now soft but unwavering. I'm not asking you to vote for a performance or a headline. I'm asking you to remember the people whose names didn't make the news, and to ask who remembers them when the cameras go off. A silence dropped over the room, deeper than that which had preceded it, and in the back of the room, somewhere, the woman in the red sweater got up, slowly. Others did, not in applause, in remembrance, because something had changed, not a campaign, not a debate, but the truth, and the truth didn't need to yell. Finally, for the first time all night, no one spoke. No one had the courage to. The room had changed from argument to something raw and honest. Schiff stood there locked in place, then nodded robotically and let the aide escort him behind the curtain. His walk was unsteady, didn't glance at the crowd, didn't look at Kennedy, just vanished behind the curtain. The moderator looked down at their notes, eyes scanning, but not reading. Then softly, Senator Kennedy. John Kennedy didn't rush to fill the silence. He let it breathe, let the moment settle. Then he stepped forward. I didn't want this moment, he said, voice low even, but I'm not going to pretend it didn't happen either. He paused, letting the weight of what just unfolded settle in everyone's chest. Leadership is something we speak of as if it were a trophy, something to be won. But true leadership is what you do when the room falls silent, when the cameras don't stop rolling, when the man beside you trips. He gazed in the direction of the stage's edge where Schiff had disappeared. I didn't bring myself here to tear anyone down. I brought myself here to remind this country that the people we forget are the people we should be fighting for. His voice grew harder just a notch, not louder, but more firm. People like Henry, like Nathan, like Sarah, the ones who don't get closing statements, the ones whose lives get rewritten by the fine print they couldn't read to afford. Then softer again. I know the price of forgetting. My father taught me that. Every scar we forget ends up on someone else. He put both hands on the podium. And tonight, when you leave here or turn off your television, I just ask you to remember that silence is a choice, and we've been silent long enough. He backed away. Not victorious, but done. There was no clap. There was no cheer. They simply stood, quietly individually, as if to say, we heard you. And the moderator, clearly shaken, offered no wrap-up, no summary, simply 5 words. This concludes tonight's debate. He allowed the words to hang there. No crescendo, no flourish, only truth, raw and unadorned. The stories I told tonight weren't for drama, Kennedy stated, voice firm but softer now, as if speaking around a campfire. They were for the ones who don't get a microphone, who write letters that they never receive an answer to, who work 2 jobs and still get behind, while those in power sign contracts behind doors and walk away clean. He hesitated, then continued. I didn't come here to give speeches. I came to tell you what leadership is. It isn't speeches. It is consequences, the ones you bear and the ones you leave behind for another to bear. He gazed across at the people. The camera retreated slowly. Some in the audience sat with hands folded, others leaning forward, all motionless. Senator Schiff didn't fall on my account, Kennedy said. He fell from the burden of decisions long ago. I wish him well. I really do. But let that serve as a reminder, not of failure, but of how tenuous power is when it's founded upon silence. A few in the audience stood at last, not through duty, but as though driven by something they couldn't identify. Kennedy picked up his papers, no longer piling them these days, just lifting them, casually folded under his arm. "One more thing," he said, already moving away from the podium. "If you can remember nothing else from tonight, remember this. Silence is cozy until it isn't, and when it ruptures, don't flee from it. Listen." He nodded to the moderator and walked off stage. No music, no fanfare, only an empty silence, similar to the echo after a bell has rung out. The broadcast hung on for a fraction of a moment longer than necessary. Then it went dark. The story was no longer merely one of a debate. It was about the reckoning that follows those lines hit like a punch. They weren't sounding studious. They sounded like a man allowing raw conviction to outrun reserve. Kennedy exited the podium and moved toward his team of aides standing in the wings. As he stepped behind the curtain, his mic still hot, it picked up his last whispered comment to Michael, his campaign manager. That was the moment. Greater than Schiff's misstep, greater than the stage drop. Before Kennedy arrived at the dressing room, clips were all over. Dozens of ex-posts, reaction videos on YouTube. Some referred to it as the Kennedy moment, others the collapse. But every replay was the same. The piece on the veteran and the daughter's unrecovered refund ran repeatedly. TikTok full of edits, some dramatic, some sarcastic, some respectfully subdued. Even individuals who never watched the debate viewed screenshots and 15-second videos of Schiff being escorted off stage as Kennedy remained stone still behind him. Late-night programs scrambled. One host cracked, "When they say the truth will set you free, they don't usually mean off the stage." Most other networks suspended the jokes. Their tone was more dumbfounded. On Fox News, a former senator described it as not just politics, this was a reckoning. MSNBC's panel was divided. One talking head called it a deliberate character assassination. Another merely said, "He didn't attack, he exposed." CNN focused on Schiff's health, speculating about stress or heat stroke. But even committed viewers left comments such as, "I used to support him, but tonight was tough. Why no response to the vets?" Others remembered Kennedy never yelled, never taunted. He simply spoke, and they listened. Older columnists who regularly ribbed conservative politicians on the air confessed that Kennedy didn't seem angry or pontifical, just prepared. At midnight, Kennedy's phone blinked 92 missed calls. His email inbox? It crashed under the weight. Messages poured in, texts from staff members, old college friends, even a pastor in Baton Rouge. There was one from a woman in Fresno. "Thank you for naming Henry. My brother worked with him." Kennedy sat on a bench just outside the venue, gazing at the pavement. Michael draped a jacket over his shoulders. "They're lining up for interviews," Michael said. "Fox, NBC, PBS, too." Kennedy didn't budge. "They'll spin it into a circus," Michael cautioned. "All collapse and drama." Kennedy nodded slowly. "Then we hold to the people. The voices nobody hears." Michael's smile was tiny but firm. "I don't think you'll need to remind anyone tonight." He extended his phone. A message from a leading newspaper editor glowed on the screen. "You didn't just show up. You changed the conversation." Kennedy hardly looked at it. Talking could wait. Commitments couldn't. The drive to the hotel was quiet. Kennedy rode in the rear of a nondescript black SUV. Nothing showy, just campaign-budgeted sensible. On the outside, the Louisiana evening swept by. Corner markets, gasoline pumps, a pawn shop sign blinking like an exhausted firefly. His phone kept buzzing. Michael had killed the notifications an hour ago, yet the screen still lit up every few seconds. Interview requests, thank yous, a few threats. Kennedy stared straight ahead, absorbing the quiet weight of it all. "Debrief now or in the morning?" Michael asked from the front. "No debrief," Kennedy said. "I just need to think." The driver drove into an older hotel on Canal Street, basic but neat. Kennedy had lodged here years ago, when he was state treasurer debating budgets. Inside, the lobby was sparsely occupied. A young desk clerk peered up, wide-eyed as if not sure he should talk. Kennedy nodded wearily, stepped toward the elevator, and let the night breathe at last. Kennedy fought a slight smile but remained silent as he and Michael made their way for the elevator. In his room, Kennedy removed his suit jacket and tossed it across an armchair. He kicked off his shoes and sat on the edge of the bed, releasing a deep breath. Not relief, really, but the sort you let out when the buzzing at last fades away and your mind can fall into rank. Michael entered, tablet tucked under his arm. ABC emails, the Times-Picayune, and a Shreveport paper, he reported. They all want to be interviewed in the morning. I told them we'd get back around to it. Kennedy nodded once. He looked down at his hands, stable now, though just after Schiff had fallen, they had been shaking. Not with fear, though, but something deeper. You all right? Michael asked. Kennedy looked up. His eyes weren't watery, only heavy. Remember the other story about my cousin? The one who lost the store? Michael speculated. The other one. Kennedy withdrew a frayed photo from his wallet, its edges worn like old fabric. A man stood in front of a small grocery store. A little girl in his arms, both smiling, unmarred by hard times. Such was Jimmy, Kennedy said. He had a store in Monroe. Then regulations, once Schiff supported, strangled the assistance he required. Jimmy worked early, stayed late, but when subsidies disappeared, it all fell apart. He turned the photo over. Dull blue ink inscribed, Jimmy and Lily, summer before the store closed. Jimmy wrote to Schiff's office. No answer, Kennedy went on. Before he could scrape up funds for an attorney, the project had a new name, and all the papers went missing. He lost the store, lost the home, began to drink. His wife left. Michael sat next to him, quiet. Kennedy nodded toward the little girl. That's Mary. She's a single mother in Lafayette these days, barely getting by. Jimmy died in a rented room above a hardware store. Only me and the fellow that used to work on his truck attended the funeral. Kennedy placed the photograph on the nightstand and stared at his steady hands once more. Steady, but bearing every tale they just recounted. He folded the picture and pushed it back into his wallet. So when I say this isn't politics, I mean it, Kennedy said to Michael. It's not about parties or headlines. It's about people like Jimmy. Whenever people call me dramatic or too conservative, I remember that there are still plenty of Jimmys out there, waiting for someone to speak their names. Michael rocked forward, his elbows on his knees. You stated that pretty explicitly tonight. Kennedy shook his head. I didn't yell it. I just flat out refused to keep it in the dark. There was a silence broken only by the gentle hum of the air conditioner. Michael got up and picked up the TV remote. Want to see the news? No, Kennedy sighed. I see what it seems like. I hope people catch sight of what counts. He retrieved a hotel notepad from the top of the desk, jotted off a hasty message, and slipped it into the pile of files on the bedside table. Before daybreak, Kennedy awoke to the ringing of his phone on the bedside table. He didn't pick it up immediately. Instead, he crept on the carpeted floor, pulled back the curtains, and observed New Orleans come alive in the dawn's pale light. For some peaceful minutes, there was no arguing, no front pages, just a city waking. He splashed cool water on his face and gazed at his reflection. He didn't appear formidable, only exhausted and worn out, but his eyes were sharp. A knock at the door. Michael entered, holding a cup of coffee. News cycle's already in high gear, he said, handing the cup over. They're labeling last night as the most significant political moment of the past decade, and it's only just beginning. Kennedy raised an eyebrow. Who's they? Michael smiled and opened his tablet. Make your choice. 3 tabs appeared. Fox News, CBS, and the Times-Picayune. All had the same image. Kennedy at the podium, files open, eyes fixed, and Schiff in the background, tumbling as an aide grabbed his arm. No need for a caption. Kennedy sipped coffee slowly. I don't want the headline to be Schiff falling, he said. I want it to be about the people. It's going to be both, Michael answered, but your message is sticking. He flipped the tablet over to Kennedy. A senior producer at Face the Nation was providing a whole Sunday segment. Below that sat a direct message from a woman named Linda. I'm Henry's daughter. You mentioned my dad's name. I never thought anyone ever would. Thank you. I cried last night. I think Dad would be proud to be remembered. Kennedy read the words twice, then breathed softly. He should never have been forgotten. Calls came flooding in. Interviews, endorsements, even olive branches from competitors. Kennedy left the arrangements to Michael. His mind was elsewhere. Late that morning, he requested a simple statement. No podium, no questions and answers, just candor. In the back courtyard of the hotel, dressed in a white plain shirt and slacks, he stood in front of a local TV camera. Last night wasn't about winning a debate, stated firmly, unambiguously. It was about people, working people whose suffering continues to get dismissed. I didn't script what happened, but I'm not surprised. The weight of truth at last shook something loose. We can't continue to call silence strength or turn our heads and act like that's leadership. If we want something better, we need to call things what they are, even when it's uncomfortable, particularly when it's uncomfortable. He signaled to the cameraman and strode off. No performance required, no one applauded. Upstairs, another message came through from a man in Mississippi whose wife, a social worker, once worked on a shift-supported program outside Jackson. Kennedy put down the letter deliberately, fingers tracing the edge of the page as if it could be gone the instant he released his hold. The room, which had been still, hung with him. No breaking headlines, no phone calls from the campaign. Only that plain blue writing and a child's universe attempting to find sense in it all. He read it again. You spoke as though you needed to tell the truth. A lump in his throat. No, not pride, not pressure, but that still, deep in the gut sadness of being aware somewhere in the din and the chaos that someone actually listened. Not a planner, not a contributor, a kid. And not because he caused a scene, but because he didn't. He folded the letter neatly and set it atop the stack of papers on the bed. Over the statements, the polling results, the letters from news anchors. That letter wasn't a campaign souvenir. It was a compass. A few minutes later, the door creaked open. Michael entered with a takeout bag clutched in his hand and a tired smile. Brought you gumbo. Figured you'd skip dinner. Kennedy glanced up. His tone was quiet but firm. Mia says I sound like I have to tell the truth. Michael stopped, forehead furrowing. Who's Mia? Kennedy gave him the letter. As Michael read, there was a heavy silence. Then, you know she said more in 3 lines than most commentators did in 3 hours? Kennedy nodded. That's what truth does. It cuts through everything. Then he stood, crossed to the window and gazed out over New Orleans. City lights blinking, streets vibrating, and behind each window a story such as Mia's. I'm not seeking power, he whispered. I'm walking into the fire so no one else will have to walk alone. Michael placed the letter on the side of the now empty coffee cup. Then we'd better be prepared for what comes next. Kennedy nodded once. For the moment wasn't finished. It was only just starting. Kennedy did not weep. He merely reread Mia's words over and over again, allowing each line to settle as a peaceful heartbeat. Something more profound than politics, softer than everything else. He folded the letter and placed it next to Jimmy's worn photo, then sat back in his chair. The room hummed with alerts. Michael texted, 8.7 million views from official feeds alone. All channels had the clip, but Kennedy hardly glanced. He'd appeared on television many times, delivered big speeches, glared down powerful people. But this was different. Not because a man had tripped onto the stage, but because a little girl 10 years old perceived truth worth writing about. Kennedy reached for the hotel notebook and scribbled a line for himself. Not for Mia, she'd left no contact information, but as a reminder to carry with him. The truth isn't the loudest voice, it's the one still standing after others fall. He slipped the note into his briefcase, behind that tattered pile of files. The pile was frayed and almost bare now, but he intended to take it everywhere. Not as a trophy, but as a whispered reminder that truth resides in names. Jimmy, Henry, Nathan, Mary, Thomas, and Mia. Kennedy never set out to bring anyone down. He gave voice to people who never get to have a mic. Narratives silenced by hush contracts, lawyer memos, and humiliation. He knew the spotlight would turn. Media cycles always revolve. But something actual had become planted. A nation fatigued of screaming had heard a sound that didn't need to scream, and that counted. The story of John Kennedy revealing Adam Schiff's hidden stories isn't only a debate highlight. It's a reflection of America's desire for honesty. Kennedy's plain pile of documents, emails, reports, and the lived agony of individuals like David, Henry, and Nathan demonstrated that tough truth could shake high walls. And Mia's letter is a testament to honest words bridging generations. Jimmy, individuals whose stories are worth more than a footnote. In 2025, when headlines are booming and attention is fleeting, this moment reminds us, you don't require a microphone to be heard saying the truth. You only need the courage to bear it. As a student challenging the system, as a parent protesting for more services, or as someone simply trying to keep up, you count. So before you scroll on past the next headline or let one more decision be made in deafening silence, pause, ask, look deeper, speak up, because voices like Kennedy's only resound when others decide to hear. Thank you for joining us on this ride, where truth isn't yelled, it's born. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share if you think every story is worth hearing. We'll see you in the next video where the forgotten are remembered and the quiet truths are finally spoken aloud. This is not reporting. This is remembering. Sometimes life doesn't change with sweeping gestures or idealized conclusions, but in the still moments when someone decides to listen, to forgive, or just to keep moving. We all come to moments of choice where pride might prevail or compassion might prevail. And in tales such as this one, we're reminded that even with disappointment or with loss, there's always space to grasp for something better, within ourselves or in another. If this tale awakens something in you, let it simmer for a bit. Not everything has to be fixed at once, but every so often a soft truth settles in and quietly shifts the way we look at things.